All right, welcome back to the My Sugar-Free Journey podcast. I am your host, Aaron Farmer, again, and today we are joined again by Carrie Brown. So Carrie Brown was just on the podcast a few episodes ago, and if you'll recall when I had her on, we talked so much about her story, with her mental health, and how the ketogenic diet was instrumental in helping her kind of overcome those issues that we didn't really talk about all the things that Carrie Brown is actually known for, namely her cooking, her desserts, her podcast life. There's a whole nother world of Carrie Brown that we could dig into. So I'm excited to have her back on the show. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Hi again. It's I'm thrilled to be invited back. It's always a good sign when somebody wants you to come back again.
Yes. Yeah, I was very upset. I wasn't upset, but because it was a good interview, but I got to the end of it and I thought, we didn't get to talk about the stuff I wanted to talk about because again, that when I first ran into you, the first time I ever ran into you, you were a 15-minute segment at the end of the Keto Evangelist podcast, and that eventually turned into the Keto Evangelist Kitchen podcast, and then now you're over at Two Keto Dudes, and I want to talk about that transition at some point. But what I think that there are a lot of people out there that are developing recipes for the keto world that aren't very good, and some of them aren't very good. And I'm the kind of person that I like things super simple. So, if I cook something like today, I'll tell you what I'm eating for dinner today. Today I threw a chicken in the crock pot 4 or 5 hours ago, and I'm probably going to steam some broccoli and call it a dinner. And that's pretty much how I eat. It's super, super simple. And so I'm interested, when people have that skill, that ability to take simple ingredients and turn it into tasty dishes. And so before we get into all of that, I want to kind of get into your background. What is your cooking background? How did you get trained? What is it that you did to kind of prepare yourself for where you're at now?
Well, I think I was actually born, I think the stork delivered me with innate cooking skills. So call that genetics or whatever you will. My grandmother, who actually died the year before I was born, so I never met her, she was a really, really good cook. If stories that have been told to me are true, and I'm sure they are. So I think there was some kind of genetic pass down of cooking genes, which I was born with. So I started cooking when I was about 3. I used to sit on the kitchen counter, and I would do the sifting of the flour and the grating of the cheese, and kind of, I would help my mum prep all the things, and I would watch her. And then by the time I was 14, yes, when I was 14, I started a business out of my parents' home making wedding and celebration cakes.
Really?
Now,
Wow.
In England, they are made of fruit cake, so dense fruit cake, covered in a layer of marzipan, and then they're covered in royal icing, and then all the piping and, all the intricate piped details. So, and that was kind of really, that and chocolate were my real passions. It was the baking side and the chocolate. So I actually had my own business, as I say, making wedding and celebration cakes when I was 14. And then I decided that I wanted that's what I was going to do. I was also at 14, 15, 16, those years, I was also catering weddings and other kind of family events as well. So that was where it all started. And I was on track to go to university to study to be a dietitian, ironic, and decided that as much as I loved, as interested as I was in nutrition and as interested as I was in doing a degree in dietetics, I was really passionate about the the baking side, the cooking side, the chocolate side. So I kind of did an about turn just before I was due to go to university to study dietetics, and took a year off because I'd then missed the start of the school year, and signed up to go to the National Bakery School, which is part of South Bank University in London. So I went to South Bank University for 2 years and did I'm not sure what the equivalent was. I did a qualification in cake decorating, chocolate work, patisserie, all the pastry things. And I was actually the top student in the country for my graduating year, but I absolutely loved it. I just was passionate about this. And I planned to leave at that point. The university begged me to stay and do the advanced. There was another 2-year course, which was an advanced course, which was in bread making and baking technology. So it was practical, but it was also the how to run a business, the law, the math, all of the things surrounding with the eventual goal of owning and operating a bakery as a manager at the end of it. So they begged me to stay and do that, and I was like, I don't want to be in school for another 2 years. So I persuaded them to let me do years 3 and 4 at the same time. So I did 1 more year at university, but I was doing both years at the same time, which was, it was a little hairy. It was all work and no play. Carrie was a very dull girl that year. I was literally studying, head in books, 18 hours a day for the entire year. I think my fellow students thought I was the most boring person on earth because I never did anything other than work. But I graduated at the end of that, the top student in the country. So it's clearly that was, part innate talent that the stork gave me, and then passion. If you're really, really passionate about something, you can do great things. So that's where I trained. And then I went to, where did I go then? I moved around the world a bit. I worked in Canada as a pastry chef. And then I moved to Perth, Western Australia, and worked in Perth as a half-time pastry chef, half-time chocolatier. So I was working with chocolate, which in Australia is quite a feat because it's very hot. But I did that. And then after I'd been in Australia a while, the National Bakery School invited me to come back. I was 23. The National Bakery School invited me to come back and take up a position as a lecturer at the university. So I came back from Australia to do that, and I lectured at the university part-time, and then I was part-time chocolatier at a chocolate shop in Kensington, and so I've done all sorts of things, but that's where the groundwork was laid. And I pretty much, there was a big gap in the middle where I left the world of, I decided that I was going to just use my skills for home, that I wasn't going to try and run my own business or anything like that. So I stepped out of that world, and I really only came back in it in 2012 or 2011, 2012, when I started to blog recipes for low carb. I had then discovered low carb, and I started to develop recipes for low carb. So that's when I kind of got back into production, as it were.
So you've got to change so much, because you were a pastry chef, you were a chocolatier. There are things that you have to change when you're going low carb. You can't use flour, you can't use things with gluten. It's tough, sometimes to make bread that tastes good and chewy without gluten. It's tough to make different recipes because you're not using sugar. What are some of the things that you had to kind of reimagine when you started making low carb recipes?
Well, it's it's kind of, the irony is not lost on me that I trained to be a pastry chef, and now my life is devoted to not using any of the things that I used to use when I was a pastry chef. And yet the baking, particularly baking, a lot of cooking, but particularly baking is all science. And that science doesn't change just because you change the ingredients. You just have to you just have to find a way to make the science still work, even though you've got different raw ingredients. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people have so many fails, because they don't understand that baking is science. They don't understand that ice cream is pure science. The way ice cream works, the way ice cream does what it does, it's pure chemistry, not in a bad way. I don't mean in chemistry in terms of chemicals, but I mean it's pure chemistry. It's kind of this balancing act between sugar and fat and water. And if that is not exact, and if you tweak it just a little bit, you're not going to get that magical ice cream thing. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. And that's why there's so many fails, because people don't understand that they're dealing with science, and that the ratios in baking are that way. It's not random.
Right.
It will only work. You have to be exact. You have to weigh your ingredients if you really want to be successful. You know, with ice cream, if you alter a really good ice cream recipe, if you alter it in any way, you're not going to get the result you want, because science. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why so many people have fails.
Yeah.
I think one of the most frustrating things for me in the keto low carb world is, and you started out by observing that a lot of the recipes that are online, a lot of them are called keto and low carb, and they actually aren't.
Yeah.
And then there's also a lot of them that are keto or low carb that don't actually work.
And don't taste good.
Or don't taste good.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this as a criticism. It's an observation. And I mean, I know that the majority of the bloggers out there, the people that are giving recipes to the world, you know, their heart's in the right place. They're doing it for all the right reasons. They love it. They enjoy it. They want to help. But they don't necessarily understand that they're not trained. So they don't necessarily understand the science, or why something works or why it doesn't. And of course, a lot of them start with another recipe they found, which may not have been a great recipe to start with, and then they tweak a few things to make it their own. And in that tweaking, they don't understand that there's some recipes that you can't just tweak to make it your own and actually still have a recipe that works. And I understand why people feel like they need to tweak recipes so that they're unique or new so they can call them theirs. But that's actually, in a lot of cases, doing the consumer, the person who's trying to stay keto and trying to find delicious food to eat, it makes it very hard for them. A lot of people, one of the things that makes me the saddest is the amount of time and money in terms of ingredients that people waste trying to make good keto food. And it sounds like you've had some of those experiences yourself.
Yeah, I mean, so again, I'm a basic guy. When I want, I'll give you a couple of my common desserts that I make for myself and for my family. We don't have desserts very often, but when we do, here's like my top 3. Number 1, 4 tablespoons of milled flaxseed in a bowl with an egg, some heavy whipping cream, some cocoa powder, and some stevia. Stir it up, microwave it for like 2 minutes, and it makes a pretty darn good brownie. And I put some butter on it, and that's it. I'm done. It takes all of 2 minutes to make. There's nothing fancy about it. Another one is when we have sugar-free pudding, like we'll get those sugar-free pudding sugar-free pudding cups. I'll put some heavy whipping cream and some stevia in a blender, whip it up, whipped cream, put it on the pudding, call it a day. Boom. And then the other one is in a blender, a ton of ice, heavy whipping cream, stevia, or no, not stevia, heavy whipping cream, and a packet of sugar-free Jell-O. So like if it's orange Jell-O, I'm trying to remember, just gelatin, yeah. So sugar-free gelatin. You put the packet in there, you stir it up, and it comes out like a frothy, I don't even know what it is, but it tastes like an orange sickle. And that's it. I mean, that's it. It takes, none of those recipes take more than 2 minutes to make. Mm-hmm. They're tasty. I get the heck out of Dodge and get back to doing whatever it is that I'm doing. And they're pretty keto. The only downside of the brownie is because it's pure, it's, almost 100% flaxseed. You're gonna have some bowel movements. I mean, that thing, it's just pure fiber, and your body doesn't absorb any of it. It just moves right through you. But other than that, that's pretty much it. Now, I know that you have some different criteria when you're making a dessert recipe. What is it that you're looking for? What is it that you make for yourself?
Well, a couple of things.
Okay.
I have zero judgment about what you just described as your desserts. I mean, at the end of the day, if you throw something together and it's helping you reach your goals and it tastes fine to you and it makes you happy,
right?
But as I say, you're also reaching your goals. That's fabulous. I'm not. People may assume that I'm a bit of a recipe snob. I'm not. If what you're doing works and it makes you happy, that's awesome. So, what I do is, and I think there's several groups of people. There's people who can be carnivore and eat steak all the time, or just eat meat and eggs, or just eat cheese and salami, or whatever, and they're happy. And they don't enjoy cooking. They don't like it. It's not a thing for them. If they could take a pill and not have to eat at all, that would be great. And,
yeah.
and again, there's no judgment. We're all different. And if that gets people to their goals and that makes them happy not having to cook, and they just enjoy eating a pile of meat, or, as you described, your slow cooked chicken and your steamed broccoli, if you're enjoying that, and you can stick to that long term and you're reaching your health goals, have at it.
So I think one of the reasons that I can stick with it is because I don't know what else is out there. You know what I mean? I've never made whatever you think of a fancy dinner that you would make for yourself if you had an hour or two to prepare. I don't know what that is. I don't and I have probably 50 keto cookbooks, because every time somebody comes out with a new cookbook, they send it to me and they want me to come on podcast, which is great. I mean, I love doing that. But rarely do I open it up or rarely do I think, I'm going to make a whatever and crack open a cookbook and look for a recipe. Usually what I do is I have a pound of hamburger meat and I'll say, okay, Google, show me keto hamburger recipes. And just kind of go through
Okay, I've got a recipe called Easy Keto, Low Carb Bacon Cheeseburger Casserole from Stay Snatched.
Thank you, Alexa or Siri or...
Does that sound good?
Shut up! Sorry.
All right,
Done. Okay, my bad. So yeah, so that's typically what I say, and she's usually pretty good about giving me some ideas.
And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're happy and you can stick to that, you don't get bored, your taste buds are happy enough, and you're reaching your health and fitness and weight goals, that's fabulous. I exist for the other group of people, which I think is the majority, is for people who, like me, I love food, not in terms of eating. I mean, I've never been overweight. So I'm not talking about love food in terms of gorging myself or just loving to eat. I love the textures, the flavors, the whole experience of the food. I just love food, and I enjoy eating lots of different things, and I enjoy experimenting with different flavors, and I enjoy trying weird new foods that I've never eaten. And there's a lot of people like that. And so I exist for those people and for the people who who actually enjoy cooking, not as a means to an end, but enjoy the creative process, that get pride and a sense of accomplishment out of having a bunch of raw ingredients and making this delicious thing to eat. And, the people that enjoy making things for friends and family as part of, family culture and family rituals. And so there's a whole nother group of people. So people like you, fabulous. But what we need also is for the people who love food and who love the cooking experience, and also for the people that just wouldn't stick to it if it was just, bacon and eggs day in, day out, or just chicken and broccoli day in, day out. And there's nothing wrong with that either, because, we're all different. So I'm here to help those two groups of people. I'm also here to help people. There's a whole generation of people who have maybe never learned how to cook because they grew up after fast food became a thing. They grew up after both parents all started working, and so they've grown up knowing how to operate a microwave. They've never learned the basics of regular cooking. When they come to keto, it's a lot harder to exist on microwave fast food, or pretty much impossible. Yeah. So I also exist to help those who've never been in a kitchen or have very little experience, because I want them to be able to be successful in the kitchen and stay keto, because I want to keep them on the keto train, because I believe in the amazing powers that the keto diet can bring to just such a vast number of people, that I don't want people who've never had to cook in the non-keto world to be so overwhelmed that they come into a kitchen and they're like, don't even know where to start. So I also want to help those people. So I work really hard to make my recipes simple, easy, instructions, so that anybody can come in and be successful. Because that's ultimately why I do what I do, is because I want people to stay on keto. I want them to be successful in the kitchen. I want them to enjoy their food, and I want them to be successful in their keto lifestyle. And I think for a lot of people, if they don't have delicious, easy food, they're just not going to stick to it.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Yeah. So let's talk. I want to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about bread, and I want to talk about desserts. Let's start with desserts. When you're doing keto desserts, I think probably the hardest thing for me to kind of wrap my head around, and I still don't think that I have it, is there's, I don't know, 20 different keto approved, I guess you'd call it, sweeteners out there. They all do different things. You can't just substitute one sweetener for another, because they all act differently, and sometimes it's difficult to know.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's just what I've noticed. But it's hard to know what one will do, what one doesn't. I know that my liquid stevia, goes good in my tea, and that's about the extent of my sweetener knowledge. So let's just talk about sweeteners for a little bit. What do we need to know about sweeteners? What are each one of them doing, and how important is it to kind of match the right sweetener for the right recipe?
I'm going to have to rant for just a minute.
Go right ahead. What you here for?
And anyone who's followed me knows what's coming. They know the rant because they've heard it before. But and the reason I get so frustrated about this is because I'm trying to stop people waste expensive ingredients. I'm trying to stop people having fails in the kitchen, because one, money and time, and two, because they get frustrated to the point where they might quit altogether. And I don't want that. So that's right. My frustration. My frustration is not for me. My frustration is for the effect that has on all the people out there, because particularly the baking ingredients are expensive. And I mean, who has time to make something that then they can't eat, right? So I think some people who don't know me misinterpret why I get frustrated and upset about it. I get frustrated and upset because of the consequences to the folks, not because of me. But if stabbing was legal, I would want to line up all of all of the sweetener manufacturers and like lock them in a room and bang their heads together and say, just stop it. Because the confusion that has been created is just, it's ridiculous for the sake of money, right? Because they all want a little piece of the pie. A lot of the manufacturers are devious, you know. I've got to talk brand names because otherwise this won't make sense. Truvia. Mm-hmm. You look at Truvia. So Truvia there's Truvia in all sorts of different packets and boxes and plastic bags and all the things and little tubs. The little tub, which is when Nisha and Ken Berry came to stay with me, I asked them what sweetener they used. Nisha told me she used tree for her coffee, for the Truvia blend. Mm-hmm. It's great. I don't remember what's in it, but it's all good. So somebody using that might think, oh, Truvia's fine. Grab a bag of Truvia, go bake with it. But if you look on a bag of Truvia, like it's half dextrose or something, or maltodextrin or something. Anyway, it's not the same. So Truvia is not Truvia. And people
okay, wait. I got a story to tell you. I got a story to tell you. So my first Thanksgiving is keto. I'm trying to make all these keto desserts, and so I pick up a bag of Splenda brown sugar because I want to make, I think the glaze for the ham or something. I'm like, okay, it's sugar-free brown sugar, no problem. Splenda, perfect. So it wasn't until like way after Christmas and Thanksgiving that I actually ended up looking at the ingredients. Well, the ingredients are brown sugar is the main ingredient and Splenda. So they're basically just cutting brown sugar with Splenda. And I was like, oh my God, how much of this did I eat over Thanksgiving and Christmas? And it was sugar. It was just all sugar.
Right. It shouldn't be that hard. You shouldn't have to like take a microscope to every single version of every single brand of every single sweetener in the store and stand there for half an hour trying to work out which one is good, right? And that, we haven't even got to talking about how they all work differently. So I up to this point, I've always been really clear. The blends are, and this is a budgetary. I think about people's budget when I'm creating recipes, as well as everything else I think about their budget. So I do not use Swerve. I do not use the blends, the Swerve, I can't even think of the rest of the names now, but there's all these blends which are essentially erythritol with a bit of either stevia or a bit of monk fruit or a little bit of something else in them. Mm-hmm. One, they're very expensive. They're way more expensive than plain erythritol. So why are you trying to persuade people to spend twice as much money on something that is essentially plain erythritol in a pretty packet? It makes me crazy because I'm trying to help people take care of their budgets as well. Because moving from junk food to whole foods can provide budgetary constraints for you. So I'm trying to help people protect that. The manufacturers are, adding a little bit of stevia, doubling the price, and then marketing the living daylights out of it. And it makes me crazy, if you hadn't guessed that already.
Well, Swerve especially is the one that, because they seem to have aggressively gone after the low-carb keto niche, because it's very common to look up, any given, dessert or any given recipe, and the recipe has obviously been sponsored or something by Swerve, because when it gets to the sweetener, it's not this sweetener or whatever. It's, a cup of Swerve, with the little R sign usually, or the TM or whatever, in it. And it's like, okay, this is not someone who's just made a recipe. This is something that Swerve has commissioned, I guess is probably the right word here. Right. And so, yeah, they're actively going after that. Now, is it true that almost all powdered sugar substitutes that the powder is some kind of dextrose, that you want to maybe stick with a liquid sweetener?
No.
No. Okay.
No. So up until this point, I have always said plain erythritol, plain xylitol. don't use the blends. But
My wife loves xylitol.
the blends also confuse the issue because then you can't switch one-on-one for this and that. You can't switch them out, the blends. So if the recipe says swerve, you pretty much have got to get swerve. And that just, that makes me crazy that you're being forced to use a brand name, very expensive thing, which is essentially just plain erythritol in a fancy packet. And so that just makes me crazy. I got nothing against swerve, but I'm on the side of the people here.
Right.
So my recipes, I use either plain erythritol, which is now very affordable, or plain xylitol, which is also very affordable. Xylitol generally in baked goods, xylitol works better in pretty much everything than erythritol does. However, there's a couple of potential issues with xylitol. One is the dog issue. Dog owners need to be super careful that their dogs don't get into anything that's got xylitol in it. So that's one potential issue. Another potential issue is that it does have a higher caloric value, and it does have a higher, I've forgotten the name of the scale. The
sweetener scale?
Yeah, whatever it's called. I'm sure you all know what I mean, but it's a little bit higher up. In some people, it will spike their insulin more than erythritol. Whereas glycemic index, that's what I was thinking of.
Okay.
Whereas erythritol is 0, xylitol is like 7, which is nothing compared to, white bread and sugar and all the other things. Some people don't have, I have 0 issues with xylitol, but some people do. But then some people have issues with insulin. I mean, my beloved podcast co-host Carl Franklin gets an insulin spike by drinking plain black coffee with no sweetener. So, right? And he has a continuous blood glucose monitor. So he knows that he gets a glucose spike just drinking plain black coffee. So xylitol does affect some people more than others, but then so does erythritol. Some people have more, have gut issues with xylitol. Some people have gut issues with erythritol. So you kind of, there's pros and cons to all of them, but from a ease of use perspective, I stick to erythritol and xylitol for ease of use and also clarity, because you don't have to scour the ingredients all the time or look for blends or be looking on packets to see what dastardly thing the manufacturers have mixed in with them. But also they're way cheaper than all the blends now.
So where are you buying pure erythritol or pure xylitol?
So I actually buy xylitol in 55-pound bags, which I have delivered by truck to my house. Because when you do recipe development and you get through so much of it, the per pound price is, you got to get it as low as possible. So I actually get it from, I think the company is Xylitol USA, I think. It's xylitol that's made of birch bark. And
do they sell it in 5-pound bags? There's no way I'm ordering.
They sell it in normal bags. They sell it in consumer sizes too, but I just buy the 55-pound bag one because I'm cheap.
Why not?
Two, because I get through so much of it, I get bored of having to order it all the time. So, and the same for erythritol. I buy it in ridiculous size bags. But erythritol and xylitol are now, the plain ones are very easy. There's a bunch of different brands up on Amazon where you can get either, and the price is coming down all the time. I am right now working on 2 different sweeteners that I think I may move to. One is allulose and the other is Boca Sweet. So I'm working with those. I'm trialing with those right now.
What was the last one? I haven't heard of that one.
Boca Sweet.
Boca Sweet. I've never heard of that.
So, but again, both of them, and the reason I've stayed away from them is money, because right now they are very expensive. Allulose is coming down in price now. So I'm doing trials with that. And I think that one, it takes care of the pet issue, but also I think it doesn't take care of the budget issue, but I think it's going to take care of some of the other issues, particularly erythritol. Erythritol, when you heat erythritol, it becomes a complete pain. It has this, it recrystallizes, and you look at it and it will recrystallize. So typically in baking, if you use a powdered version of erythritol and xylitol, you're usually going to get a better result.
Okay.
But with erythritol, and sometimes people will ask me, why do you use erythritol in that recipe or xylitol in that recipe? Like what's the difference? How do I know? There's no easy answer to that. Sometimes I will use erythritol because I know that it has properties that it makes it crystally. Once you've heated it and it's cooled down, it gets crunchy and crystally. So I will use that in recipes where I actually want to harness that property. So for example, I have a strawberry surprise crumble. It's actually a crock pot recipe, but it has a crumble topping. I specifically used erythritol because it goes crunchy after it cools down.
Okay.
And so I used that property of erythritol to make a better crumble because it gets a crust. So,
yeah, and that's what I was talking about with these sweeteners, because the average person, and I'm including me in this, is we don't know which sweetener gets crunchy when it gets cooled down, or which one you'd want to use in a pastry, or what is it? What are these? What else do we need to know about these sweeteners and how they act to heat, or to, I don't know. What are other things that we need to know about, like trauma? You stir up a sweetener, what does it do?
Right. So, hey, that's a really, you've reminded me about something. So I have done so many trials with erythritol and xylitol trying to get them to behave like sugar. And the one thing, because erythritol is just such a pain, and actually so is xylitol, but not quite as much. It doesn't crystallize quite as fast. But I did discover, I've done a massive amount of experimentation, and I think this is where people are so confused and they're not getting the answers. They can't get the answers from the people that are writing the recipes, because the people that are writing the recipes don't understand the science. And so they can't explain why they use this or that. They're just using Swerve because Swerve paid them, or they're just using Swerve because that's what the other blogger used, and so that's what I'm going to use. And or I use Swerve for this and it worked, so I'm going to assume that Swerve is just like sugar and it's going to work everywhere the same, and it doesn't. But because people don't understand the science behind this, they end up having fails because they don't understand this. And unfortunately, I guess, even though I'm a pastry chef, my focus has never been on recreating the carby things. My focus has never been on the fathead pizza dough and the bread and the desserts, because they're great. But even in a keto world, they should still be treats. So my focus has always been creating recipes for life, for every day. What am I going to have for dinner on Monday? What am I going to eat on Saturday night? And what's the main dish that I'm going to have at this celebration? Or so my focus has never really been on the desserts and bread, but I'm recently I'm kind of moving over that way, because I've had so many people get so frustrated about not having options that work, not having options that taste good. I mean, I have people who tell me that, yeah, I don't eat fat bombs anymore, but when I started, fat bombs was the only thing that kept me in.
Right. Yeah.
So although long term fat bombs should be a treat, or maybe in a year you don't even want to eat them, but for a lot of people they can play a critical role in keeping them on board long enough to get the result and get some healing going on and change their palate so that they then don't want that stuff. So I don't think there's anything such as, you should eat fat bombs or you shouldn't eat fat bombs. If fat bombs keep you in, eat fat bombs.
Right.
But my focus hasn't been on that kind of stuff now. But I am now starting to. I've actually been working on quite a lot of desserts lately, because I'm just tired of hearing. Not tired in a. I'm frustrated with them. I'm frustrated with the situation. Hearing the fails they have, hearing how difficult it is, hearing that the recipes on Pinterest aren't keto, or hearing that it didn't work, and when I asked her why, she couldn't troubleshoot it with me. She didn't know why. The person who wrote the recipe didn't know why, and I'm frustrated and I've wasted all this money and time. So I'm getting tired of hearing that. So now I'm going to help provide some solutions to that. And as I say, I'm not tired of the people.
Right.
I'm tired of the situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about breads then, because I know that's something else that you do. When we're dealing with bread, the gluten in the bread is what makes bread chewy and have that, or sometimes even crunchy, depending on if you toast it or not. How can we kind of replicate those textures in keto breads? So,
and as I say, that bread is... One of the things I'm famous for is my scones, as we would call them in England, or biscuits here. A lot of people will say that either my cheesy biscuits or my sour cream and chive biscuits are the best biscuits and the best bread-like thing they have on keto. So I'm definitely in the right ballpark there. I'm about to embark on a bread journey. So hopefully, I don't have recipes now for bread, but I clearly need to head in that direction. So that's on my list of things to do in the very, very short term.
Are you is there any room in the keto movement, I guess, for homemade sourdough bread where it's made with wheat, but it's fermented for long periods of time, where the fermentation process has broken down a lot of the things in the wheat that is that's bad for us? Do you think that it's possible to make a sourdough bread that doesn't spike insulin?
No.
Okay.
I mean, you're not going to get. You might get rid of a few carbs, but you're not going to get rid of most of the carbs. And I think I have, what do they call it? Non-NSNG, I think, or non-NGNS,
NSNG. That's definitely it.
Is it? What's it?
No
called?
sugar, no grains.
No. I'm thinking I don't have celiac, but I do have a sensitivity. I do have a genetic sensitivity to gluten. Okay. So I'm a big anti-gluten. Like, I think gluten causes a lot of us way more problems than we think. So yeah. I will never be a fan of using any gluten-containing grain, even if it's been fermented or whatever else we've tried to do to it. I'm never going to be a fan of that. But no, you can't get rid of enough carbs to make it keto.
Are there
definitely going to work on the bread, and if I can replicate at least the flavor of sourdough, then I will.
Are there low carb, what would you call it? Low carb flours, like coconut flour or something like that react with yeast?
There are. So Julie, I don't know if you're familiar with Julie McClure from Foxhill Kitchens.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So she uses yeast in her bagels and her buns.
Okay.
And she gets a rise out of the yeast just from the carbs that are in the almond flour she uses. So that's
interesting.
very high on my list of things that I need to experiment with, because a lot of people have said that it's not just the texture that they miss, it's the actual yeasty flavor.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
That's another thing that's on my very short list, is that I've got to solve this bread problem, because I literally sometimes I go to Facebook and I just want to cry, because these people have spent so much time and money, and all they want is a recipe that'll work.
Mm-hmm.
And the vast majority of them just don't.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad. So I need to fix that.
Okay.
The only desserts that I've really, really worked on is ice cream. One of the things I'm famous for is ice cream. I was the ice cream queen before keto. I used to wow work colleagues and neighbors and all the people with my ice cream making skills. So it made sense to try and transfer that into the keto world, which I've done very successply.
Your ice cream recipes are phenomenal. I love them.
I actually have a whole book which is just ice cream, keto ice cream. But I do need, and the only other book I have that really has desserts in is I was asked to do a holiday cookbook, because people were just like tearing their hair out over the holidays. So I do have a holiday book, and that has a bunch of desserts in, your pecan pie and your chocolate cream tart, and, a bunch of other eggnog ice cream, chocolate rum truffles. So there's a range of desserts in those, but I am working. In fact, I have a bunch of desserts that I'm getting ready to post on the blog over the next few weeks. So desserts are coming, folks.
Fantastic. I look forward to him. Well, I want to spend a few minutes talking about your podcast journey too, because like I said, when I first found you, you were on the Keto Evangelist Kitchen. And then, right before the first of the year, I had to change the podcast that I was listening to, because I had a little less time at work. And so when I went to go look for you, I was shocked to see that you weren't the Keto Evangelist Kitchen anymore. And, you're in the Two Keto Dudes. And in fact, Two Keto Dudes is one of the ones I had to stop listening to because I had, time. And so I was like, what? Wait, this is all very confusing to me. So let's talk about, first of all, how did you and Brian from over there and at the Keto Evangelist, how did you guys meet up, and how did that start? Your podcast career, I guess we'd call it.
Oh, my podcast career didn't start with Brian.
Oh, did it not? Okay. That was where I met you then.
No, I did a podcast back in 2012 with a gentleman called Jonathan Baylor, and he was the start of my low-carb journey. We did a podcast. He wrote a book called The Calorie Myth, and that was around the same time I started blogging. I started creating low-carb recipes. So that was the very start of my low-carb journey, and I podcasted with Jonathan for couple of years. A couple of years. And so that was where I started. And I still have people now that have been following me all of that time, who followed me from Jonathan and his approach and the low carb over to where I am now. So that was where I started podcasting.
Well, where did you meet Brian? How did that start?
Brian emailed me and asked me to be a guest on his podcast.
Oh, okay. So then, you were like the last 15, 20 minutes of the Keto Evangelist podcast, and then you got your own podcast over there at Keto Evangelist Kitchen, which is phenomenal. I still love it. In fact, I still recommend it to people that are trying to cook. And then, now you're over at Two Keto Dudes. And that was the other thing that I was kind of surprised about. So you and Carl there, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name. What was the other gentleman's name from Australia? Richard Morris. So, where's he, how did that all happen with you over there?
So the timing was just magical. The universe just served up. It literally was when I stopped doing the Keto Evangelist Kitchen podcast. A few weeks later, Carl Franklin pinged me, because Carl Franklin lives in New London, Connecticut, and I moved to Connecticut 10 months ago, quite by chance. And Carl and I didn't know each other, but Chef Taffany Elrod, I don't know if you're familiar with her. She does keto. She has a restaurant in New York and she does keto, and she and I are great friends, and she was also friends with Carl. She took me to meet Carl back in May last year, and Carl and I were like, oh, we didn't know each other, but we got to know each other. And he's like, hey, we should come on my podcast. You need to come on my podcast. You need to talk about bipolar, and hey, you're a foodie and this is great, and come to Keto Fest and talk at Keto Fest for us. And, hey, this is great. We're all part of the same community. So, and obviously because I live half an hour away from him, it was easy for us to, start collaborating. So I went on his podcast, he came on my podcast, and then I went to Keto Fest, and that was all great. And then out of the blue in October, Carl messaged me one night and said, hey, Richard Morris, who is his podcast partner for the last 3 years, Richard is doing an advanced degree. He's going to get his doctorate, and he just doesn't have the bandwidth. He's doing all this research, and he needs to focus on school, and he just doesn't have the bandwidth to do all the Two Keto Dudes thing anymore, the podcast and everything. And, we've talked about it at length, and we would really love it if you would come and be the dudette, if you would come and be the nice new dude on the Two Keto Dudes, we would love that. Would you consider it? And I said, this is on Facebook Messenger, and I'm like, Carl, can I get back to you tomorrow? And not because I really had to think about it, because it was just the most amazing opportunity, but because I was like, of all the people out there that you could have asked, I was just like, I was blown away. I was, wow, you asked me. Wow. Right. So that was kind of just a magical, like the stars just all aligned at just the right time, because if that had happened a few weeks earlier, I wasn't available.
Right.
But that all happened, and they didn't know that it was going to happen. And then Richard said, hey, I just can't carry this load anymore, and let's ask Carrie. So that's how that happened, and here I am.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great story, and I'm glad that the world is not deprived of your cooking wisdom. But it's great that that worked out, and I loved it. I've always loved the Two Keto Dudes podcast. I thought their stuff was really, really good, and both. I'm sorry, God, I can't remember his name. Carl Franklin and. What was the other one's name?
Richard Morris.
Richard Morris. Yeah, listening to Richard, I mean, he obviously just had a wealth of knowledge about the chemical processes and everything that when somebody goes keto, and it was always so interesting to listen to the two of them together. It was great. So I'm glad that you're back there and you've got you're on the airwaves. So
well, it was interesting that I was in one place, and then there was this few week gap, and then I suddenly found that my audience had grown tenfold from one to the other, which Good. Was, the Two Keto Dudes have in excess of 260,000 downloads a month. And,
that's fantastic.
And it's amazing, but you can imagine that when Carl asked me, I was like, that's awesome, but oh my goodness, that's a lot of people, and that's a lot of listeners, and I have these massive shoes to fill.
Right.
And people love Richard. Richard's an amazing guy, and they love him. And, but Carl and I knew that there were going to be people that were really sad, but so I didn't want to be part of the sadness, but there's no way around it. People miss Richard, I miss Richard, but life goes on, and so
nobody likes change.
I decided that I'm not going to try and replace Richard. I don't replace Richard. I bring something new and I bring something different, and I bring another crazy accent, and I bring a female perspective, and I bring the cooking science, which they didn't have before, but we've lost a bit of the body science. But, that's, change is, you got to move and change. So while we all miss Richard, and we know that we would lose some people, and that's fine, but we've also gained a whole bunch of people who, were like, you need to get a podcast. Where are you? We miss you.
You always attract your tribe.
You always attract your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been really, really great. And the welcome I've had from the Two Keto Dudes audience has been amazing.
Good.
And I feel very honored. I feel very humbled. I feel not good enough every week when we go to record, but hopefully that'll diminish. I just hope that I'm inspiring people and helping people and helping them on their keto journey somehow with what I know about food.
Yeah, I think you will. And I think I've heard enough of your podcast interviews to know that you're very good at that. So, Carrie, just one more time, if you can tell my listeners where to find you, and obviously the Two Keto Dudes podcast and your website and all that good stuff, and then we'll call it a night here.
So the easiest way to find me is carriebrown.com. So CarrieBrown.com. There's over on the left-hand side, there's a tab, there's an About Me. And if you go there, you'll find links to all the things, the Twitter account, the Instagram, all the things, the Facebook group. We have a thriving Facebook group called the Keto Kitchen, where we troubleshoot recipes and we post new recipes and we share things, and we have Thrifty Thursday where we help each other. We share budget-friendly kitchen tips and tricks, and its main focus is food. So the main focus is not the science of keto. The main focus is, okay, I get the science and I know I need to do this, but how do I apply that to everyday life, i.e. what do I eat? So we have a lot of fun in there, but all of the links to all of the places are up on my website, and all the recipes too.
Good deal. Well, guys, we're going to put links to all of that in the show notes. You can find that at mysugarfreejourney.com/podcast. And Carrie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm so grateful. I love talking to you. I feel like I could talk to you forever. So maybe we'll have to do a show on, I don't know, pick an ingredient, another ingredient to troubleshoot, or maybe when I've solved this bread problem, I'll come and explain all the science to you. Actually,
I would love that, because my wife makes like an almond meal type bread, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it could probably be better. So if anything we could do to improve that would probably be better. So again, thanks for coming on the show, and I wish you all the luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, those of you that are listening, hold on. We'll be right back with some more information.